Hello and a warm welcome to VAT Update from Tax Essentials for Advisors. I'm Ed Thompson. As ever, we'll be looking at the latest from HMRC, recent case law developments, and other news in the world of VAT. In HMRC news, we've got updated guidance on VAT grouping and on VAT repayment claims. Turning to the cases, we've got a first-tier tribunal decision dealing with VAT invoices and the evidence required for VAT recovery. After a long wait, a case on the VAT recovery of costs associated with share sales, which provides some much needed clarity in this area. And what you've always wanted, a case on the VAT liability of rotisserie chickens. And finally, in other news, the finance bill has been introduced to Parliament, and we'll briefly recap what's in there from a VAT perspective. The update to VAT grouping is all about HMRC's protection of the revenue powers. Now, these are powers that allow HMRC to remove a member from a VAT group if it believes that that's necessary to prevent a loss of tax revenue. The change in the guidance is particularly relevant to UK VAT groups that include overseas companies or branches, especially where those entities are partly exempt and can't recover all the VAT on their costs. In those situations, there can be scope for VAT savings, and HMRC is clearly alert to that. HMRC recently lost an argument on this point in a first-tier tribunal case involving Barclays, but despite that setback, it seems to be doubling down on its position. The revised guidance now states that if it looks like the main reason for VAT grouping someone is to ignore supplies from that company's overseas branches to other members of the VAT group, HMRC may act to protect the revenue. HMRC has also tweaked its guidance on the details that need to be provided to support a VAT repayment claim. Now, there aren't any major substantive changes here, it's more a case of clarification. That said, it's a good reminder that repayment claims, where VAT recovered on costs is greater than VAT declared on sales, will often trigger pre-credibility checks from HMRC before the repayment is made. And this is especially common where it's the first return or the first repayment return. The updated guidance sets out what you can expect HMRC to ask for as they validate entitlement to the repayment. Typically, you'll be asked about the nature of your sales and the associated VAT recovery, and you'll be expected to provide copies of sales and purchase invoices to support the claim. Our first case is a first-tier tribunal decision on VAT recovery evidence, a subject that so often trips up businesses. The case involved a company purchasing luxury goods for export to customers outside the UK, and the goods were being sourced from high-end retailers like Harrods and Louis Vuitton. There were some unusual elements to the VAT invoices provided by Harrods, and HMRC argued that they didn't meet the criteria for valid VAT invoices, but the tribunal disagreed, finding that they were valid and VAT recovery was therefore allowed. As for the Louis Vuitton invoices, these did not meet the conditions for a valid VAT invoice. But the tribunal concluded that HMRC was being unreasonable in refusing to exercise its discretion to allow VAT recovery on the basis of alternative evidence. Now, it would be far easier not to have this kind of debate in the first place, so the case is an important reminder to get clear VAT invoices if you can. However, it also shows that the obligation on HMRC is to exercise its discretion to allow VAT recovery reasonably. HMRC was given a similar slap on the wrists in the High Court recently. Our next case this week is one the VAT world has been waiting for with bated breath, but unfortunately it's not the outcome that a lot of people were hoping for. It's the final stage of litigation in Hotel Latour, which concerns whether VAT can be recovered on costs incurred in relation to share sales. The issue is quite a tricky one. A share sale itself is VAT exempt, but some have argued that recovery might still be possible where the ultimate purpose of the sale is to raise funds for VATable business activities. In this case, Hotel Latour, which was a hotel operator, sought to recover VAT on the costs of making a share sale on the basis that the proceeds were going to be used to operate a new hotel. The first tier tribunal and the upper tribunal had found in favour of Hotel Latour. However, the Court of Appeal sided with HMRC, ruling that VAT recovery was not possible because the exempt share sale broke the chain of VAT recovery. The Supreme Court has now given its final word and concluded that the exempt share sale meant that VAT could not be recovered on deal costs, and there wasn't scope to look through this to the ultimate taxable activity. Our final case is on a very different subject matter: rotisserie chickens. Morrison's sold a category of rotisserie chicken known as cool-down rotisserie chickens. These were chickens that were cooked and packaged with a view to being sold oven fresh within a couple of hours. Now, the VAT legislation contains a distinction between hot takeaway food, which is standard rated catering, and cold takeaway food, which is generally going to be zero rated. Now, following the saga over the pasty tax back in 2012 that many of you may remember, there are some quite specific rules that determine whether food is to be regarded as hot or not in our weird VAT world. Ultimately, the supermarket lost because of the packaging, which retained heat, whether or not it was primarily designed for that purpose. In addition, whilst there had been some interaction with HMRC over the years on the liability of the product, it did not meet the threshold that the taxpayer had a legitimate expectation that its chickens could be sold zero rated. Finally, in other news following on from the budget announcements a few weeks ago, we've now seen the introduction of the new finance bill into Parliament. Now, it will now work its way through the various stages of Parliament before receiving royal assent and becoming law. The key VAT provisions in the bill, which we touched on last time as part of our budget update, include changes to the treatment of top-up or advance payments under Motability, the exclusion of private hire from the TOMS regime, and a new VAT relief for charity donations of goods. That's all for this one. I look forward to our further update in a couple of weeks' time.